Good evening, dear listeners of Splinebom. Welcome to the fourth edition, and I'm very happy to be sharing an hour or a limited amount of time with Joe Munday, who is very familiar with State of Mind and is an artist as well. And I've been waiting for this, to have a discussion on State of Mind with an artist. She's a wonderful person. We have planned absolutely nothing, so you can get the freshest ideas possible. And so welcome, Yo. How are you doing?
Thanks, Henk. I'm really good, thank you. Yeah.
Did that introduction do any justice to you?
I don't know. I don't really call myself an artist, but if you want to call me an artist, then that's fine. Yeah. Where should we start?
So you do create with, like you do create. You're a creator.
Yeah, and I was thinking about like creativity actually, in terms of what is it, and I create video content, so I usually create live action, sort of short online video content for people's websites, for people's businesses, and so I actually create something physical, but actually everything is a creative process. Like there's nothing. It's such, the more you think about it, the bigger it actually becomes. Because even today, I was doing my tax return, and I was getting really creative about how to avoid paying too much tax and my expenses. And I just thought, well, that's quite a creative thing actually. Thinking of all the different things that I could claim for. Yeah, so I suppose it's anything where it's just fresh ideas, isn't it? Sort of something new that emerges from an old pattern, or it's just, life is a creation. Your life is a creation, and I suppose artists are more conscious of the creative process, but everyone's doing it all the time, and I think it's good to be conscious of it as have a think about how it works, but actually it's just going to happen anyway, isn't it?
So you're saying there's basically no such thing as idea block. You always have ideas coming up. Like there's writer's block or a deadline block, or you're trying to come up with an idea and you feel like it's not coming, but you're basically Are you basically saying that there's the whole life is a creation? So there's a normal person actually rarely runs into a lack of ideas.
Well, I think even non-creation is a creation, because it's a decision that you're making, and it's a way of being. I think when we get blocked, we are we're really trying, and we're sort of pushing against ourselves, and we're pushing against something that's stopping us, and the decision to kind of keep going rather than take a break or think about something different or whatever, that's still a creation, if it makes sense. But I suppose what's new for me is that I never really thought about how I was creating or the patterns that were coming up for me, and I was just kind of churning out quite a lot of video content, and sometimes I'd get really stressed about it because I couldn't think of the idea, and then sometimes it would be fine and an idea would come really quickly. But then I sort of started to I started going to workshops and personal development seminars and things like that, and I came across Jamie Smart's work, who was pointing to a kind of understanding of how the mind works that really resonated with me. And having done a year's course with him and into my second year now, I've really understood my own patterns in terms of whenever I get a new project, a new proposal for a video, I've noticed I'm sort of like looking at it going, what before I have the idea of how I know how it's going to look, I'm sort of like, I look through the proposal, and I've had this tendency to, I need to know exactly how it's going to look straight away, and then there are those thoughts that say, oh, this time I'm not going to have the idea, I'm not going to have the spark of inspiration, and then you can get quite insecure about it. And through kind of understanding that you're sort of creating all that insecurity from within, I've been able to really just sit back and really take my time with things. So when a new proposal comes in, when someone asks me to do a video, I'm not pushing myself into this, like this pressuring myself to actually have the idea instantly. And it was sort of this idea of like tension and release, where you get that sort of like creative tension where you're going, how do I do this? And then the release that comes when you actually think, that's what I'm going to do. And I still have that, but when I get into that tension of like, what am I going to do? I don't make it worse by going, I've got to work it out now, or this is going to be the one where I don't have a good idea or something like that. I can just let it go and walk away from it if I need to, or go into it but with less pressure, just kind of go, okay, let's see, bounce some ideas, and it's just much lighter than it used to be. I used to get very stressed about whether I was going to produce a good product, basically.
I find that the way you describe the creative tension and how you handle that, so you get an assignment with a fixed amount of time. That could be like 5 minutes, or usually it's a little longer. I love, it almost sounds to me like you take, you see for yourself that the possible insecurities are your own creation, and that there's no need to do that, because it's not really helpful. And so it almost sounds like you enjoy that creative tension. It's like, okay, this is the limitations that I have. How can I, or what can I do to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for sort of, having that maybe a deadline, or like there's a sort of a tension there that it kind of pushes you in, doesn't it? You kind of have to, sometimes you just have to get on with it and do it, and there's an energy to it, but I think I've realised that my ideas aren't coming from that tension. My ideas aren't coming from me really pushing through. They're sort of, when the best ideas come, they kind of feel like they've come out of nowhere, and they've kind of they've just kind of appeared. So I always like the challenge of a new product. But I suppose I just know it's not, the idea isn't coming from the tension itself. It's coming from really being present to the moment. And when we are really in the moment, then we can access a source of creativity that is sort of, well, I don't know where it comes from, but it just feels like it's coming from beyond the personal mind. That might come when you're doing something totally different. There's that cliche about, if you're in the shower on holiday, then you have your best ideas. But equally, you can have your best ideas when you are really in it and you're really focusing on the problem, and something happens, and then then an idea comes. And I think the example of being on holiday or really working hard on something is that in both those occasions you're really in the moment. So when you're enjoying your holiday, you've forgotten all your stress, you're just really in the moment. Equally, when you're really working hard, you're really focused on that one thing. You're not thinking about what you're going to have for dinner or what you're doing next week. You're just really in that, and then that's when there's a flow to life, and so your idea for your work might come from being on holiday. There's no kind of correlation between what you're doing and the topic of the idea, but it all just seems to come when you're really present and just completely absorbed and at one in that moment. Because I like to, if I'm feeling like, I'm not getting an idea, I like to just go for a walk in nature and take myself away from it. But some people really like to kind of go in and puzzle it through, and sometimes the wisdom comes through then. I know when I'm filming, on filming days, there's lots, there's a very strict deadline, and there are lots of variables that could go wrong. There's people I've got to look after, there's people, there's camera crew and people I'm interviewing or whatever I'm doing, and in those moments, which the ideas will come just because you're kind of reacting moment to moment what's going on, because you have to, and so that's a creative process as well. But what I've written, from my work recently with Jamie Smart, and sort of quieting my mind, and realising more about the relationship between my life experience and my thoughts. What I've noticed on those filming days that I have now, I used to wake up in the morning really, really quite stressed, thinking, I've got to do X, Y, and Z, and straight away my mind was really busy and thinking about all the different things and possible scenarios and what could go wrong and all those things. And then when I got there, all the things that were going to happen happened, and I'd be in the moment again, and it would all happen as it did, and if things went wrong, I dealt with them fine. But the real difference is that sort of, I don't have that real panic in the morning going, what if this and what if that and da 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 da. I just kind of go, well, stuff's going to happen, and it's kind of trusting the wisdom in the moment. You've always got access to this creative insight. You've always, moment to moment, being in the moment, really sort of immersing yourself in the moment. There's always that, you're hardwired into that. You're connected to that wisdom, and really knowing that, really trusting that, has enabled me to be quite free from that. Oh God, what if this happens? What if that happens? And because you're realizing you can actually, if X, Y, and Z happens, you will deal with it, and your best shot at dealing with it is really being in the moment rather than panicking.
That's a good way to say it. That's a good way to say it, I think. And rather than panic, it's really, I think that's a really simple way to describe where good ideas come from. So when something happens, rather you can like panic or be in the moment. No, actually you said it better. The way you said it is more useful to be in the moment rather than panicking.
Yeah. By a mile.
Well, yeah, I think everybody understands that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of funny because it sounds such a no-brainer, but I think after you've done that for a couple of times, like you've gone through an experience and you've panicked, you're like, well, I survived, and the panicking didn't help. And the next time you're there, you're like, are we going to panic again? Well, I don't really feel like doing that. That's because it doesn't help. And but even that, I think at some point you just run into being present, and then you're just doing whatever needs to be done.
Yeah.
That's what I find very interesting in when you read about other people's experiences when something dramatic happens that could happen to everybody. Like, for example, your house catches on fire, which is like something that could happen. And some people panic, and some people get really quiet and really calm and just like, okay, well, I need to take my passport, money, my old photographs, I'm going to take a hard drive, and then walk out and then call the fire department. And yeah, that's all I can say about it, I guess. I find that very interesting how the circumstances don't exactly influence what's going to happen. It's actually the person that's creating that.
Yeah, and so like your example of the house on fire is interesting because it's like, that would be quite an extreme situation where people would assume that like the experience of the house being on fire is coming from the fact that their house is on fire, not from the fact that they are thinking panicky thoughts about the fire.
Yeah.
And so you can actually have a very calm experience of a house being on fire if you can just get out and take your key belongings and realise that moment to moment it's all just thought, running through you, and then just do what you need to do. I don't know, I'm reminded of that story where, the golfer Greg Norman, who nearly cut his hand off recently. I don't know whether you... and, well, the article caught my eye because he was said that he just knew that there was going to be he had this ominous feeling that something was going to happen before he did it. But as I was reading, it was interesting because he just said he he completely didn't panic. He did all the things he needed to do. He wrapped it up. He called the people that he needed to call, and it was all quite sort of methodical.
Could you tell a little bit about the story? Because I haven't heard it, and I'm not sure how many people have heard it.
Oh, okay. So, you know the golfer Greg Norman? Is he the Great White Shark or something he's called it? And he was cutting a tree with a chainsaw, and he severed his hand and almost cut his hand off. And I was reading the article because it caught my eye because it was about intuition, and it interested me because he said just before he cut the branch, he thought, oh, should I do this? But he ignored his intuition and he did it, and then he nearly cut his hand off. But he was able to get to the hospital very quickly because he didn't panic at all. He just did everything that he needed to do, spoke to the people, got someone to pick him up straight away, and it all happened very quickly because there was no additional thinking. What struck me that there was no additional thinking. He just did exactly what he needed to do, and probably being a world-class golfer probably helped because he's been in those scenarios before where there's been a lot of apparent tension and stress, maybe hitting a shot in the Open or whatever, and he's probably got a very profound understanding of the fact that the importance of his own state of mind in those moments, and that when we are in those extreme scenarios, whether we've injured ourselves or whatever it would be, where we feel in danger, or that, for him, this, a sort of international golf tournament, everything that we're experiencing is actually coming from our own thoughts rather than from the circumstances around us, however extreme they are. And that's really freeing, and it's really I found it's really freeing to really sort of immerse myself in that understanding, because in any moment we can have a new thought and we can free ourselves of any of that stress, regardless of what's happening around us. So if your house is on fire, you can have a very calm experience of it, and you can do everything that you need to do to make sure you're safe and everything's safe and you get everything out the way. But when you have an understanding that your experience of the fire is coming from within you, from your own thoughts, and really kind of knowing that, really knowing that in your body is like, not even from an intellectual understanding, but from a real knowing, it's hard to describe really, but it's just like an feeling. Yeah, we're much more invulnerable than we think we are. And yeah, we have more choices and more freedom, I think, than we believe we have.
That's beautiful. Jeez.
Jamie Smart actually talked about thought being like the principle of thought taking form moment to moment within you is like a fire. So a fire isn't actually a physical thing. It's like a chemical reaction that's kind of burning. It's sort of every moment it's changing, and it's not really real. It's just this boom, 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 boom. And when you're having a stressful thoughts, it's like maybe the fire's raging or whatever, but it's all just happening moment to moment, and it's all coming from within. And however, while this fire is raging within, you are... There's a presence within you that is more than that thought fire. That there's a presence that is unchanged by that, and I think most people would agree that they're more than just a chain of thoughts. There's something more than just a row of thoughts that keep going on and on and on and on. But I don't know how many people really explore what that is beyond that chain of thoughts.
It kind of reminds me so we've been talking about the fire, right, and having a house on fire, and then having the metaphor of having a panicky feeling is like a fire. It's like a moment-to-moment storm of thoughts, right? And in both cases, we point to the fact that your thinking creates your experience. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a simpler way of saying it than I did, I think.
I'm probably quoting somebody. So the idea that came up for me was, and I think most people might be able to recognize this, when you look up at the stars at night and the sky's dark and you see all the little lights, it is really hard to not be present. And so you're very aware of what's up there. It's like all these little dots. That's what they look like, right? They look like little bright dots. And on a deeper level, you know that they are actually stars very far away. And so somehow that messes with you a little bit, because you're seeing, you're thinking literally. You're aware of the fact that you're just seeing little dots in the sky, but you know that they're not dots. And so there's something that doesn't match up. Because you know the stars are not dots, they're planets. Which really messes with your mind in a good way. And and so you actually,
I love that.
Yeah, and that's why I was laughing, because I got that feeling of like, what's and so I think when a lot of people experience that knowing of like, these are not dots, but I see them, and they're probably not aware of it. And then you realize that you are not your, like on some level, I think you get a sense of that you are not your thinking. You are not, like, your experience of those dots is not you. I think that's the magical feeling you have when you look at the sky. I think that's a really beautiful clue as to, like, your thinking is an illusion in a way. It's not. It's a creation, basically, and I think that's a really nice, weird example of life where you get to see that really clearly.
I love that. Yeah. Everyone's perception is completely different, isn't it? So someone in Norway will see many more stars than, in London you hardly see any stars because of all the smog. And as you say, they are these amazing balls of fire, like millions of miles away, that you can't even comprehend. And And on the other end of the scale, a quantum physicist will say like a single cell in the body is basically empty space, and like like inside an atom, like an electron and a proton, and like if you blew it up to the size of a stadium or something, they'd be like a pea or something in a stadium, and the actual matter of the atom is so small, and yet that we perceive each other as solid masses, even though we're basically a lot of empty space. So what we say, we can't trust what our eyes show us. But yeah, no, it's just very much about that it's all a perception, and we can change that in any moment. And that's very, very liberating. Because when you get caught up in your thinking, you can feel a bit trapped in the situation, but actually you're only ever one thought away from an insight or a more pleasant thought or something that would just change everything.
Feels almost like the trapped feeling you get when you're really stuck, like stuck with points to the fact that you're believing your thoughts are real. It points to the fact that you are not really stuck. You know this, like you're not physically stuck, and if you're physically stuck, the experience of that is your thinking, and the moment you start like believing that your thinking is reality, there's a disconnect because you're not paying attention to what's happening in front of you anymore.
You're being sucked into the movie, haven't you? You're sort of like, this is all too real,
you're dreaming, but you're not looking out anymore. So it's like you're driving with your eyes closed, believing that whatever is going on in your mind is real, rather than looking outside like, am I still in the middle of the road?
Yeah.
And so I guess the unpleasant feeling points to not so much to the circumstances, but to the fact that you're not seeing clearly. So the moment let's step back to the fire, so your house is on fire and you're panicking, right? That unpleasant feeling points not so much to the fire, because if it would, everybody would have the same feeling, and it doesn't. So what does the unpleasant feeling point to? It's to the fact that you're not seeing reality clearly. You're not, like, you're ignoring things out there. And so I guess, I don't know, yeah.
And I suppose your best way out of the fire is to have that detachment in the moment, to kind of go, well, probably easier said than done, but
to have the ability to have fresh, clear thinking, which comes from the fact that you're present and seeing. And where does that come from? From wherever. Basically, it's new ideas, and I don't know where those come from. Maybe you do, but the fact is, if you're ignoring where the doors are or the exit or the current, that's like there's like in that particular situation, if you're very aware of where you are and what's happening and what you're seeing, you might come up with you might have an insight. It's like, I could I don't know what you can, like people come up with all kinds of crazy solution in weird situations, like unreal ideas to a solution, and those, like, it's a eureka moment, the moment of insight that comes from either not being, I don't know, I'm trying to find out where it comes from, but there's no answer for me there, but being aware of reality is certainly a good thing.
And yeah, I don't think we ever really need to know. It's just because I think you can drive yourself mad trying to work out where it all comes from. But kind of just trusting that there is a wisdom there that will guide you, and I mean, for me personally, trusting that has improved my just general state of well-being just so much. In terms of, as I was saying, I don't get stressed on filming days anymore. Even like today, talking to you, I haven't thought about anything I wanted to say specifically, and that's, I used to be very sort of, real kind of perfectionist tendencies, needing to very much prepare things. So that's a very different experience for me in how I do things now. It's just very freeing, and it's my own health is just so much better because of it. Just that, trusting that we have got there's infinite it's like there's this kind of infinite well of possibilities behind us at any one time. And that sort of churning cycle of thoughts that we have is probably not the place it's going to come from, the new possibilities. So all the planning I could have done for tonight's call would have come from sort of churning away and getting from my own current way of thinking, and that wouldn't have allowed, I wouldn't have trusted what would have emerged just from letting go of that and seeing what does come through, and I found that what does come through is often much better and just full of brilliant surprises, really.
I think that's a great way to say it. To just have the trust that there's lots of brilliant surprises out there, as long as you don't churn away on your thinking too much. Which sounds like a rule of thumb, but it points to the fact that if you're paying attention to your thinking, you Like I don't like saying that there's like a way. The reason why I backed up is because I don't like saying like you should do this or that, which is the tempting thing to do. It's like if you right, and that's because the whole idea is that fresh new insight is usually gonna make things possible or move forward or help you out, and so saying there's a rule of thumb, like if you do this and this, you're going to get that and that, is contradicting that completely. Which is frustrating because interesting at least, the first two calls that we had, and I know this from my own experiences, that I love to, like, I have a deadline, what can I do right now to make it happen? Give me just the 3 steps. And the 3 steps is the tricky part. Is they're there, but they're context sensitive. So there's not going to be a rule of thumb that's going to be applicable to every situation. Like even saying you need a clear mind might not be the the proper thing.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying like, oh, don't prepare or anything like that, or just let it all sort of go. Like, I just mean like, well, for me, it's just about the trust, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's
that I can let that go a bit.
That makes sense, right? Well, like nobody would ever consider. Like, I like this extreme example of the house on fire because it makes it so simple in a way to talk about. Nobody would ever ask someone, like, what are the 3 steps I need to take to get out of this particular house? Like, there's like common sense. There's like things you can prepare to get out of the house, and there's like lots of stuff you can to do, like put in structure to have flammable walls and all that. But in the end, once you are in the experience of that, you're gonna have to run with what's there. And in that moment, you're dealing with something that's unplanned, basically, and having I got myself caught up again. It's like in that, like, just what I wanted to point to, the fact is it would be foolishness to ask for like rules of thumb or pointers to help you out of a unique situation. Nobody would ever do that because it makes no sense. You would rely on whatever insight comes up in the moment, and the best chance you have of having a really favorable outcome of a really good experience is not to have like a booklet filled with rules. No, it's being like in the moment and aware, and then something might help you and come up, which is a really big leap of faith to take, because it's like, is that going to be there when I need it? Well, you'll find out, probably.
Yeah. I mean, sort of throwing the rule book away is
Sorry, go ahead. You were going to say something.
I just think, as humans, we've got all this potential within us, and we sort of almost looking for rules, looking for guidance from outside, and that's like for those of partly the way we're all the education system and all these things.
You know what the difference is?
Yeah.
It just struck me that like it's very useful to talk to a fireman about how to get out of a fire, right? And so we're used to that. Like, okay, how do I get out of a house? But you cannot prepare for everything. I mean, life is pretty random. I think that's a big distinction to make. You're gonna, like, at some point, or with lots of things, you're gonna be have to rely on yourself, right? And so it's useful to read books, and it's useful to get information and to get insights from other people, but it's essential to have the trust that you can come up with great stuff when you need it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that moment to moment insight, that moment to moment capability that we all have, that perhaps we're not consciously aware of, because it's not really discussed. Or when I interview people on camera, I write questions down before often, but then I just put them to the one side, and then I just ask what comes up, and I actually listen to them, and then I respond from what they've said with a different question. So I usually don't use many of the questions that I write. But that's kind of, as you say, maybe reading books or taking guidance from others, great, but actually in the moment.
So what came up? I had 2 examples that I'm just dying to share, but
sure, go for it.
So we've been talking about Jamie Smart for a couple of times. I just want to refer. He's the writer of the book Clarity, and he gives training courses in state of mind related things. And one of the things that he talks about is there's a guy who wrote a book about strategic intuition, and in that he the writer of that particular book looked at like great generals and people like make really good decisions, and they basically would read a lot of information, just get all the what's there out there, like all the stuff that's already known. And then when the moment comes to perform or to do something or to wage a war or to save somebody or to create a great masterpiece, they would let go of all of that, knowing that they already had tapped into what's known already, and the next step is going to require like insights in the moment that come up when you're doing it. And I think that points beautifully to being prepared for something if you need to, and then like you do, like write down your questions, and then when you're in an interview, there's no guidance there. You're just in the moment, and then it's a creative process from second to second.
Mm. Exactly.
I'm sorry, I derailed your train a little. I didn't consciously mean to do that, but.
No, I think we are agreeing.
I have one story to share with you, and then we can see where this goes. We'll wrap it up. A while ago, I sat down in the park, and there were crows, and they were just on the grass, and there were sheep, and it was a farm, and like a crow doesn't have much rational thoughts. It doesn't go like, what's the meaning of life? So it just appears to be like present. It's just sitting there, like watching left, right, left. It never drifts off inside. It's always outside and like paying attention to the world. It's almost like it feels almost like a machine, because it's a living thing, but it's very aware of what's going on. And so I was just mesmerized by this crow just sitting there, just like, and it didn't seem to do anything. It was just sitting in the grass, waiting for the next thing to happen, like the next second, and then the next second, and the next second, just being present. And at some point, I watched the crow do something, and I look up, and all the other crows looked up as well, and I looked to the side, and there was like 200 meters further, there was somebody like throwing breadcrumbs on the ground, and so the next thing had arrived, and everybody's like, food, and all the crows went up and then flew away, and it was such an interesting thing how crows work, because they're just like I don't know, just watching. Like a normal human being in the grass would be like drifting off, wondering how they're going to avoid their taxes in the best possible legal way, or what to prepare against a fire. And then the crow doesn't do that. It's just a crow. And it just trusts that it has this wisdom, and it's like, okay, there's food now, so we're gonna go get that because that's the thing to do now.
Mm. And we think we're like so much more intelligent than all animals on Earth, and then maybe they have it right.
yeah, we're a little. I think we're a little struggling currently with it, but once you see, like, there's no need to churn on the thoughts, and there's just the beauty of being present is actually. A really good.
It just opens you up to the richness. I think the richness of life and the variety. I think because thoughts can get a bit repetitive, can't they?
You know that. That's the last thing I'm going to share. I'm for work. I'm train riding. Like, I'm commuting like a lot, not like like up to 2 hours to go and 2 hours to go back. And I used to be so bored with train riding because I'd be sitting in a train having the same thoughts, and the same thinking would be, "Oh, I don't like train riding," and it would be like a self-enforcing circle, and I would be just so bored with being on trains because you're hearing your own thoughts again and again and again. If you believe that to be the truth, you're like, train rides are super boring. They're like, I can't believe how boring this is. And and so at one point I said to a guy, like, I'm so bored with train riding. And he said, so do you like traveling? I said, no, I just like to be in places. Like, I'd like to be in Paris or France or wherever. I don't like to travel there. And then it struck me, it's like, well, I'm being on the train. So that's being. So how is that, like, I'm not actually even walking. I'm just sitting there. I could be, like, it's the same experience as sitting on the couch. And so nowadays I'm like, what am I going to do today on my couch? And I just happen to be on the train, but virtually there's no difference. I'm just being me. And so I have this, like, a little bit of clarity with that. Like, I'm not so interested in my thinking around trains, and I end up, like, being mesmerized by whatever I'm doing. And so train rides, like, I'm not going to say I love traveling 4 hours by train. There's lots of other things that I'd like to do more, but they're not boring anymore by any stretch of the imagination because I'm not in the same train of thoughts. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, so instead of thinking, what I'm going to do when I get to my destination, or I wish I wasn't on this train, you're actually just more fully immersed in the experience of the train.
Yeah, exactly. And it's never the same. That's the funny part. I mean, it looks the same if you believe you're thinking, because your thinking never changes if you believe just that train of thought. But actually, every second is different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's just the immersion, isn't it? The immersion into with the real juice of life. It's just really, wow. This ride could be the most amazing. Just to kind of absorbing it all, rather than having a single thought about what I'm going to do when I get there, or I wish it was quicker, or any of those things.
Yeah, you're just present. You're not caught up in the past of, like, all the previous train rides suck, or all the future train rides are gonna suck, which is like the same repetitive thought. You're just like, who the hell's this? Where am I? Who's that? What's this? What can I? And then after a while, I just forget, and you get what you described in the beginning, and like an embodied understanding of it, and you're just there being you, like the crow sitting in the grass.
And you can just feel blissful on a crowded train. Like, who'd have thought?
Yeah, it's funny, huh? And then when that happens, you notice how other people are in their horrible train ride thoughts, and they're like, I wish I wasn't here. And you're like, wake up. Don't do it.
Yeah. There's a biologist called Bruce Lipton who wrote a book called The Honeymoon he wrote The Biology of Belief, and then he wrote The Honeymoon Effect, which is basically about how you can be in that honeymoon effect, honeymoon feeling, like really feeling of love and every moment of your life, if you're in the moment. Because if you're thinking about the past or the future, you're back in your conditioned thinking, which was kind of programmed in when you were 7 and under. And that honeymoon feeling is there for us every single moment, and that's what is really what I really like is how science and spirituality are kind of, you know, connecting more and more, and then all these kind of sort of unexplainable concepts like love and things like that are sort of being brought into biology and physics, which is like amazing. I'm really excited about where it's going next.
Yeah. That's why we're doing these about art.
Yeah, exactly.
Although we didn't talk so much about art itself.
No.
We did explore the outside in nature of life, so that's good.
Well, I hope that was helpful, Henk.
I think it was an amazing call, if I might say so myself. I think you did yeah. Well, we'll find out. Like we can think all about it what we want, but did you have a fun experience?
Yeah, it was great. I love talking about this kind of stuff, so I hope it was useful.
Yeah. Well, that's up to the viewer. I think there's lots on offer here. And if you're looking for the advice in the past or the future, you're not gonna find it. It's just in the moment. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joe. Yeah, I was just wondering, if anybody wants to reach you, is there a way to find you online, or would you rather not do that? Or
Yeah, I've got a website. It's Munday, which is MUNDAY.com.